Thank you again for suggesting this, Gail. This will be the first of a series on our Unitarian Universalist Association sources. In Article 2 of our UUA bylaws, it talks about 7 principles and 6 sources. For now, there are changes likely coming. That is a regular process. Every 10 years or so, they review these things, and they've created a Article 2 study commission to do that. And this is from that charge. We particularly urge the commission to review the sources. An explicit inclusion of Unitarianism and Universalism as our sources seems timely. And there have been energetic discussions about how other faith traditions, such as Buddhism and Islam, among others, might be included or put on footings more equal to those of Christianity and Judaism, end quote. So we will hear some more about those sources in the future. This is Article 2 as it is right now. Unitarian Universalist congregations affirm and promote 7 principles, which we hold as strong values and moral guides. We live out these principles within a living tradition of wisdom and spirituality, drawn from sources as diverse as science, poetry, scripture, and personal experience. These are the 6 sources our congregations affirm and promote. Number 1, direct experience of that transcending mystery and wonder affirmed in all cultures, which moves us to a renewal of the spirit and an openness to the forces which create and uphold life. Direct experience. So some of these direct experiences that many of us may have had, gazing on a newborn infant, watching a sunset or a shooting star, just being overcome by love for all beings, having a sense of oneness with all things. Like we heard Kay read, the mystics say, "You are as close as my own breath." And Stuart Davis's lyrics, "I whisper in your ear, you are already free. Soon you will laugh and remember that you're me." And being vividly aware of an ultimate reality just beneath the surface of everyday reality. Thus, learning that consensus reality is an illusion. The Buddhist story, which got quoted by Donovan, first there is a mountain, then there is no mountain, then there is, or perhaps by using a purple crayon to draw a mountain and create illusory reality of one's own. A more definite definition of all this, mysticism is distinguished from other metaphysics by its quest for salvation or union or liberation through some sort of practice or exercise. It is assumed that all these experiences are connecting to the same reality, that same underlying unity under all religions. The book I was reading says this is not proven. I'm not sure how it could be proven, but that's a very good point. I do assume that that experience is the same for all, but I don't know. It involves a direct intuition or experience of God or nature or infinite love or non-dual reality, whatever it is that you understand to be ultimate, beyond the self or within the self or both, bringing serenity or bliss. I think many of us have had some of those mystic experiences, and many of our Unitarian and Universalist and UU ancestors have done as well. The Transcendentalists, for example, were all about feeling that transcending wonder for one's self. They pointed out that it's not true because Jesus said it. We respect Jesus for saying it because we know it's true. That felt experience was what was most important to Margaret Fuller and Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry David Thoreau. They also got into spiritualism and seances. Many universalists were part of the people that created spiritualism and the whole concept of seances and what happens in seances. They really thought that that was bringing scientific laws and cause and effect into the afterlife and supernatural, and therefore making it more scientific and more understandable. Many of our Unitarian forebears were also into such spiritualism, although they were a little more circumspect. Typically, they thought they were too good for such common things as spirits knocking on tables. They created their own higher spiritualism because they were special. But a lot of names that you might know, Theodore Parker, Thomas Starr King, all wrote a little bit about spiritualism and its value, although they also sort of held it at arm's distance. William Henry Channing, not William Ellery Channing, but William Henry Channing was very much into spiritualism and also cast shade on it from his pulpit. So it's an interesting mix of possible connections to mystical experiences and how much we want to claim them or not. There are many, many UU naturalists, people who find their ultimate meaning in some kind of experience of nature and have done great work in preserving nature and creating more access to nature for the public. And I know lots of UU clergy and lay leaders who were hippies in the 60s and 70s, and speaking at least for myself in 2021. So there's lots of mysticism running through our movement. An important point to notice about mysticism is that it can happen to anybody, anytime. Infants have these peak experiences. Old folks have these peak experiences. And when we have them, we usually interpret them through the lens of our own cultural understanding, the words we've been taught about ultimate reality. So if a Catholic nun in the 12th century felt this, she would imagine Jesus coming and speaking to her, whereas a South American shaman taking ayahuasca might see jaguar or plant people or the gods of the forest visit them. Hippies would feel oneness with love. That agnostic fisherman we saw in the video is one with nature. The language that we use to describe these experiences is that which we're most familiar with. I do think it's the same experience. We use different language. I think it's similar that kids spin around until they're dizzy and then collapse on the ground giggling. I don't think that's union with the deeper reality, but it does disrupt consensus reality and it hints at something more, which is part of why we like it, I think. Now, the real root of this conversation ought to include some of my own experiences. And I have had them using psilocybin and stone cold sober. I've had them by myself. I've had them with other people. The one that I wrote about for the UUA pamphlet on mysticism was at Aquinas College up in Grand Rapids. I was preaching there over a summer right out of seminary. And like this congregation a few years ago, renting another space, they would have to come in early on Sunday morning and set up all their stuff. They used the student center, and they would put up chairs. They would bring the little organ and whatever other musical instruments they were using that day. They had banners. And while they were setting all that up, I made sure to get there early and connect with the people. And then they suggested I might take some time to myself off in some other room and ready myself for the service. I went up into this room where no one else was and said a short prayer, basically, please say something good through me today and let the people learn or hear what they need. And there was this overwhelming sense of love just pouring through me. It was overwhelming. I almost fell to my knees. It was so powerful. Just this sense of immense love, and with it, the sense that it's always there. That's our normal lived experience, that we have played this game and pretended it's not there and that we are separate and different. And if we awaken from this trance, then that sense of belonging, that sense of wholeness, that sense of just flooding love is always there. It was present for some amount of time. I lost track of time. It was perhaps 30 seconds or a minute at most. But weeks later, I could still recapture that feeling of just being carried away by such powerful love. And the only thing I had that morning was coffee. So that doesn't usually happen on coffee. I went to a gathering of people who are interested in the Integral Institute, who are imperfect, but have some important things to teach us. It was a weekend experiential training in Chicago. There were, 100 people there. And through a variety of practices, we stood in a circle and moved around to get our subtle bodies to mix. We enlivened our bodies with motion and patting. We sang together, and had a sort of a group meditation wherein I definitely felt part of something much larger than myself, and it seemed that others in the room were as well. So much more wisdom, much more love, much more strength and purpose being shared among us. That was a very good weekend, and one that still informs some of what I do to these days. What I do most often is meditate. I try to do it twice a day. And not every time does something like this happen, for sure. In fact, rarely is something that powerful happen out of meditation. But when I'm lucky, once or twice a month, for sure, it's not exactly transcending ego. It's not a flood of love, but it is a separation from the tiny ego and noticing that I am part of something larger, much more vast than the grasping little self that I'm usually aware of. So I do a lot of meditation, and that happens somewhat regularly now. Some theologians postulate that these experiences are the roots of all religious practice, that somebody somewhere had an experience and wanted to have it again and wanted to share it with their friends. And so these roots grew into regular church practices or rituals or liturgies, an attempt to create that previous connection. Our UUA fourth principle talks about a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. I think in this case, we already know what it is. The search is for the words to describe it to others and for the means to experience it more frequently and more certainly and to inhabit it more deeply. What may have worked well when it was a small group of similar folks recreating the experience they'd had last Saturday is more difficult now that we have lots and lots of people from a wide variety of experiences and social locations. We are fortunate that people find entrances into a mystical experience from a variety of paths. Music is often a way of doing that, either listening to some music, playing music, singing music, dancing to music. Incense can do it for some. Visual art can move people to a mystic state. Poetry, being in nature, the joys and concerns, I'm told, oftentimes people find that to be the most meaningful, the most moving, the most connecting part of a service. Just sitting in silence, some sort of meditation, some sort of physical exertion. In the video, we saw the person playing basketball, chanting, especially kirtan, fasting can do that. I don't recommend that one, but it has been used in the past. And it's important to notice that all of these work for all people. In fact, each of these is a barrier to real religious experience for at least some people. Every one of those things is annoying or a block for some people, whereas it works for many others. So we try to have a variety of things on Sunday mornings and other times. Again, I think meditation is probably the safest and most reliable way to achieve some kind of mystical experience. I am finding my way back to now, just constantly following the breath and coming back to now. And as you learn to become less distracted by the demands of the ego, we may glimpse that underlying unity and that connection. Because this is America, there are some gadgets to help this process. Now, some people say that because we can sort of recreate these kinds of religious experiences, these mystical experiences using electrical stimulation, that disproves any other religious, spiritual, mystic experience that anyone's ever had before. I disagree with that. I think that it does not disprove mystical experiences any more than stimulating the appetite disproves hunger. We human beings experience these urges, these yearnings, and we can stimulate them ourselves sometimes using electronic stimulation. Neural feedback guided meditation training is the most recent thing I've heard about. And so they put on some sensors and recognize the brain waves and the patterns of your brain waves, and they know how different patterns create different experiences. And then using feedback, they help guide you toward the neural signature of the kind of mystical experience you want. If you want the experience of your body dissolving into oneness, they can sort of help you lead that direction. If you want the experience of feeling compassion for all beings, they can help you move that direction by giving you feedback. I have not tried that myself. The one that I've used most frequently is sort of the brute force method of entrainment. And that'll take a little bit to unpack. So there are brain waves that are electrical activity in our brains, and they happen at 4 main frequencies. All 4 of them are present almost all the time, at least in trace amounts, but at any one moment, one of them will be more active than others. You may have heard of some of these. So beta waves are the fastest, and that's when you are strongly engaged in some activity, when you're working a crossword puzzle or having a conversation with someone at a meeting, depending on the meeting, but when you're active and aroused and really working at something, your brain will be at this beta wave frequency, which is 15 to 40 hertz. A little bit below that is alpha waves. That's 9 to 14 hertz. That's more relaxed, more restful, not really focused on something. Below that are theta waves, 5 to 8 hertz. And that's sort of daydreaming, just kind of sitting there, not doing anything and allowing your mind to wander, or somewhat more dangerously, if you've been driving for quite a while and you can't remember the last 5 miles, that might have been a daydream in which your brain was operating at that 5 to 8 hertz theta wave. And then the deepest waves are the delta waves, between 1.5 and 4 hertz. That's deep, dreamless sleep. If you're in deep sleep and you begin to have dreams and that rapid eye movement sleep that you hear about, that's back up into theta. It's deeper than that and dreamless and really healing sleep. That's also where experienced meditators and long-time passionate prayers end up. When they're deep into their practice, the brain goes all the way down into delta waves, and you can use entrainment to just brute force put your brain in that brainwave state. For the first several times I experienced this, I just went to sleep, because that's what the usual state is. If you're in delta waves, you are going to fall asleep. The point is to eventually be able to be awake through that and embrace it and feel the experience, the benefits of those waves, and not just fall asleep, although the sleep is always healthy for us. People ask if that's the same thing as actually meditating for years and years. And if it's not, it's a shortcut. Whereas someone who had been meditating for 20 years and could take themselves into that state, I still rely on this technology to help push me into it. But it has brought benefits. I am healthier and happier now than I was when I started this. And a lot of the research that I've seen shows it is beneficial. So it's better than nothing anyway. Now, the company that I buy this stuff from it's called the HoloSync technology from Centerpoint Research. I am not encouraging anyone to buy anything from them, just saying this one thing worked for me. They buy a lot of, they sell a lot of products. They have different recordings that will put you in any of those 4 states. If you want to be at work and really hyper-focused on something, they will sell you something that has all kinds of beta waves going on. If you want alpha or theta or delta, they will sell you a thing to do it. I have not tried most of those things. I make no claims about how good they are or how effective. They seem to be mostly safe, but I'm not going to even say that. I will say that some of the HoloSync technology has worked for me and helps make my meditation deeper. So whether or not you meditate or exercise or sing or engage in whatever spiritual practice, I encourage us to notice that our most vital spiritual practice is restarting our spiritual practice. We are all busy. We get distracted. The point is to keep restarting the practice without guilt, without shame, without beating ourselves up about, oh, we stopped again. Pick it up again. The practice is the practice. Just keep trying. I know of at least one congregation in our UUA that has 3 requirements for membership. The first one being an active spiritual practice, including parenting or teaching small children, because that is a spiritual practice. They require this practice because they want their members to be moved toward a renewal of the spirit and to be open to the forces which create and uphold life. And I wish that for you and for me and for all of us as well. So may we be.